is Noël Gaudreau. I'm running to be your candidate for the People's Party of Canada. So I just want to cover a few bases. First off, one of the biggest issues we've had talking to conservative voters and ultimately getting them to vote for us has been the vote splitting issue. I can't cover this enough. There is no vote split in Provencher. If we're going by the 2019 election numbers, Ted Falk that polled over 31,000 votes, whereas the Liberal candidate was just under 6,500 votes. There is no way, even if we take 50% of the Conservative vote, that the Liberals can get in Provencher. I'm gonna beat my head into a brick wall with this one. Secondly, if you're conflicted on the issue, if we're looking on a national level, I ask you this: are the Conservatives still conservative?
No!
And that's my point exactly. To touch upon a couple issues I've also had questions on, I'd like to make sure that this information gets circulated as much as possible, because I'm still getting questions on these subjects. Firstly, I am a pro-life candidate. I am a proponent that life begins at conception. The second question I've had most often that is non-COVID related. On the subject of supply management, we've had multiple discussions inside the party. It is still part of our party platform. However, we will not be able to touch it for at least 2 to 3 election cycles because of our current national fiscal position. Ultimately, removing supply management will be extremely expensive. So for those dairy farmers and chicken farmers, this is not something that you're going to have to look at from our party for at least a decade. In addition to this, we will be making consultations with all farmers before we make any steps. It is not the party's intention to ultimately abuse these industries. We want to support you guys and have you do well, but do so in a market capacity. In addition, the other question that we've gotten quite often is on our firearms policy, specifically regards to Justin Trudeau's order in council. We will be removing his order in council completely. We'd also like to see large-scale reforms into the Firearms Act. If you guys want very detailed information on the subject, I would suggest you look up the simplified classification system on Google. This was a policy widely circulated in the 2016 to 2017 Conservative leadership race. It'll give you all the write-up for every classification that will be changed. With that, I thank you for coming, and I'm just going to grab a drink of water and then we'll start the question period.
Yeah, if anybody's got a question, you can just come up to the mic. You can actually ask your question right into the mic, and Noel will be happy to answer it. So feel free, don't be shy. I'm sure if you have a question, 10 other people have the same one. Well, I guess he was so eloquent that he just answered everybody's questions. None? Zero? It's just that good of a platform. It sells itself, he says. Freedom sells itself. Who would think? Hey? Wow.
Yeah.
What a novel concept. All right, well, if nobody's got, we got one coming up here. Fantastic, everybody. Give her a hand. The brave soul coming to ask a question. What's your name and where are you from?
Andrea, Grunthal.
Andrea from Grunthal. What's your question, Andrea?
So if you only get a couple purple seats in federally, what can you do for Canadians? Can you even make a difference with a couple purple?
So indeed we can. We can for sure get the freedom message out there and spoken in Parliament. And ultimately, I think we're going to do significantly better in a couple seats, particularly if you're looking throughout the rural prairie. I'm soft expecting at least 5 or 6 seats. In which case, I do think we will end up being balance of power for a conservative minority government. We're in a excellent position right now to hold them to account and make sure they stay true to conservative principles.
So Andrea just said, so is it more that the People's Party will be steering them back towards conservative principles?
In the short term, that would be the likely outcome. Ultimately, we want to keep that Overton window open as large as possible to allow people to properly articulate themselves. So ultimately, we are going to, at least on the short term, be something akin to an NDP of the right. However, so a lot of people might be disappointed by that. I would argue that you'd have to look over the last 70 years of Canadian political history. I think we can all agree the NDP have had a tremendous amount of influence over the left of the spectrum in Canada.
Good question.
Thank you, Andrea. Great question. Gentleman here. What's your name, sir? Where are you from?
My question technically would probably be more for a Maxime question, but since you're a candidate here, it's all good to go. All the parties seem to be set in realizing that our entire economy revolves around our relationship with China. That being said, your policy as the PPC has always been Canada first. With even on today's, on the government website today, I'd seen that the federal government is pushing for businesses to become more fluid with how they're doing business with China for their cryptocurrency that they're bringing in, and for their that whole currency thing, the social credit. Thank you, social credit score. With that being a big push into Canadian businesses, how are you guys planning on combating that to not only keep us in a Canadian economy, but to basically remove manufacturing from China, from Canadian companies, and bring it back onto our soil, so that we don't lose all of our skilled labor here for everything which has gone there? Because even go to something as simple as textiles, we've lost probably our total ability to produce textiles here in Canada. So something as simple as that, how do you plan on bringing that back into Canada to keep our economy from being so dependent upon China and other nations?
Thank you. Excellent question. So, as the gentleman in the front said, we are indeed a Canada First party. A lot of this will have to do, I think, to tie into elements like the carbon tax, our taxation policies. Largely, we've created an environment that it's not of interest for large-scale businesses, manufacturing firms to ultimately produce things in our country. To add to this, those jobs, because they typically pay lower wages, I would say also aren't attracting the workers like they once did, if we were to go a number of decades ago. So ultimately, it'll be creating that environment for those businesses to do business again in Canada. As I just stated, tax relief. That I think is that regulatory burden is kind of the two biggest impediments to business, and at least in my perspective.
Thank you, Garth. Don't worry, people in the back. You're only an hour and 29 minutes away now. You're getting closer. Anybody else? Got one here, Mr. Isaac.
How do you know my name? Yeah, it's Isaac from Landmark area. I was an owner-operator of a truck. I had my own truck. So my question would be, I went and I bought a gallon of oil for my little farm tractor at home, and they had a 15-cent environmental fee on it. Now, when I go and buy a truck, I spend about $30,000-$40,000 more for my truck as a consumer, and that's all truck drivers and all people in that walk of life. And when I come to service my truck, we the consumer, we pay the expense to service it and to keep it going. So what does that 15-cent environmental tax do in order for us to kind of that we're being overtaxed? How will you address that? Because when I see they're buying bigger jets for themselves, and they have all these massive parties, but we have to pay the bill. So how can we bring that down or bring some accountability? I know it takes money to build roads and all the other things that, but we need accountability in government to kind of, yeah. Anyways, that's my question. So I don't know if you can address that or not, but here we go.
Well, thank you for the question, sir. So it is indeed the People's Party of Canada policy to completely obliterate the carbon tax.
Yeah.
With myself personally, being that we're experiencing some of the highest debt levels and the, I'd say, the longest sustained deficits in a very long time, I would also argue for pushing further in eliminating a certain percentage of our pre-existing environmental levies that were existing on fuel and oil products. Because ultimately, transportation will affect the cost of general goods, and in that case, reduce people's consumption power.
Thank you. Behind me. There we go. Where are you from, sir?
Hi, I'm Stan from Elma.
Stan from Elma. Welcome, Stan. What's your question?
I'm just curious if you could just say a little bit about your background. We know that Max was run out of the Conservative Party, and that's how he started. And so, how did you get involved with the People's Party?
Great question.
Yeah, thank you, Stan. Previous to this, I had always been both a PC and Conservative Party of Canada supporter. Big-time gun owner, so obviously there's no real logical place to park my vote beyond the Conservative movement. Then it came to the leadership race. I ended up voting primarily for Maxime Bernier. I found him encouraging, very outspoken, which was refreshing. Ultimately, when he ended up quitting the Conservative Party in 2018, I actually called his constituency office about an hour after he quit. So the funny conversation there revolved around, well, he'll probably get to you in a week. We've got about 400 interview requests. About a month later after that, we had our first annual general meeting with the Electoral District Association of Provencher. I worked with the Provencher board up until last election very directly. And ultimately in February of 2020, I took on the role as provincial coordinator for the province. So I've been all in since he started.
One more here. What's your name, sir? Where are you from?
Grunthal Terry. So where does the party stand on stepping out of the Paris Climate Accord? I read on here where we're making everything globalized. And I see that biometrics is becoming a very prominent role in a lot of the nations here. So I just kind of wondering where it says that we will step back from the Paris Climate Accord, right?
Thank you for the question. So indeed, we are planning on completely dropping the Paris Climate Accord. These targets are unrealistic and ultimately are simply a great detriment to our economy. They are removing jobs and ultimately ruining people's lives.
Thank you, Terry. If he doesn't get in, what's he going to do about the vaccine passport? What are you going to do about the vaccine passport if we don't get in?
Protest.
So I guess a bit of advice to circulate to everyone. We've been reached out to from university students, nurses, teachers, multiple different professions that are now looking down the barrel of this thing. For those that are in unionized positions, I would advise against quitting. I would wait for the federal and provincial governments to mandate your respective professions. after they give you an alternative to the vaccination, promptly book off on stress leave. I would also advise speaking to your coworkers, because you would not believe the amount of people who are double vaccinated but still believe in the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. This has probably been the most encouraging thing I've heard from people. Just for, I suppose I myself fell into a bit of a depression with it, thinking that unfortunately my countrymen had fallen prey to this centralized authoritarian way of being. And thankfully, with all of you, I'm reassured of that fact is indeed wrong.
If I can just add one thing to that. Does anybody know what happened in Moscow last month?
No.
Is anybody aware of that?
Nope.
So they tried to institute vaccine passports in Moscow. What happened was businesses went to enforce them, and people, unvaccinated and vaccinated, didn't go to those businesses. If there was a business that was segregating their population, enforcing segregation, and just saying, sorry, we're just following the rules, it's not our fault, they didn't buy there. What happened? They didn't buy there. The businesses said, we were doing bad before, now we're doing worse because nobody's supporting us. This isn't working. What do you think they did? They complained to the mayor, they complained to their city council, they reversed the vaccine passport in Moscow. It's no longer there right now. So the woman's question up front was, what can you do as an average citizen? And I said a little tongue-in-cheek, well, what can you do? Back to her. But that's the question for all of us here today. What can you do in your own life? And Noel had a great couple of suggestions. Another one on there is, if you're facing the barrel of this gun and you're a teacher or you're working for the federal government and they're saying they're going to fire you, don't tell anybody your medical status. Don't tell them whether you're vaccinated or not. That's your information. You put the onus on them and require them to take the liability of firing you, okay? And everybody else here who's against segregation, go to these businesses, try to eat there, whatever it is, make them turn you away. Put the onus and the liability on them.
Yeah.
Just had to go on a little rant there. All right, anybody else? Hey, sir, where are you from?
Rockery, Manitoba. Hi there, I got a question for Noel and the PPC. What is your views on self-defense, the act of self-defense, and protecting our lives against criminals and stuff like that? I don't know, firearms and more self-defense. Yeah.
So if I understand the question correctly, it's how the party and myself view self-defense as it pertains to the criminal code. So the party does not, unfortunately, have any direct guidance on this. Myself, I'm very supportive of it. It's ultimately, if you do have a home invader, you should be able to defend yourself.
Thank you. Yeah, another one from Terry, right? Fire away, Terry.
So, question. I would like to see a leader downsize the government. Like, at the end of the day, we are sticking our noses in everywhere. Is that a party basis that we would, if you would get to the top, that you would start to eliminate a lot of these fat government? Like, it's amazing. You know, I probably paid over $100,000 in tax every year. You know what? I'm not trying to brag, but you know what? At the end of the day, they suck taxes like crazy, and they manipulate into all their rules. I would like to see a leader come in saying, you know what? Let's downsize these governments so that they can be in charge of our roads, our healthcare to a certain extent, but they get involved in everybody's lives. And you know what? It's got to stop, because we're destruction. I'd like to hear your opinion.
Thank you, sir. So at large, the party is a small c conservative party. So that means we'd like to see the federal government play as small as a role as possible in everyone's day-to-day lives. We'd like to diffuse A lot of the powers that are currently held by the federal government down to the provinces and ultimately the municipalities. It is our opinion that this is a lot better form of governance. Ultimately, because you'll have better access to those representatives than, of course, you will to the Prime Minister in Ottawa.
Small government, big individual. We have one here? All right. What's your name? Where are you from?
Jennifer, just Portage. So my question would be that we all know that last election, we actually won by a landslide with votes across Canada. But it was the ridings, it was the seats that took it. They won by those, and they all know that if they get Ontario, blah, 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 they get the power. Is there anything that you guys can do to change that unbalancedness? Like to change the fact that they have so many ridings and we have like big ridings but not a lot out here, so that all they have to do is poll over there and they win, or they win over in Vancouver. We don't have a lot of say, so to speak, as country people. It's the big cities. That's really unfair, and they're dictating to us what's happening. So where do you guys stand on that?
So if I understand the question correctly, the question is regard to elections reform. So there's a couple things to unpack there. For Manitoba, we actually have a very good, well-weighted vote if we're looking at constituents per member of parliament. Of course, we aren't the population centers of Ontario or Quebec. I think the one reason that most individuals in the prairie have this thought process that our vote doesn't count is because we'll continuously park it with the Conservatives, and by that they don't have to work for us because we have no other place to currently park our vote previous to the People's Party, of course. And from that, it creates this laziness in Ottawa where our concerns, I would say, aren't generally heard in comparison to those of Ontario and Quebec. Believe it or not, if you look into particularly Toronto, for example, there is some ridings with constituencies that exceed 150,000 people. That is electors, I should iterate. By contrast, if you look at Provencher, we have about 68,000 electors. So we actually, on a per capita basis, have a lot better representation. There is some examples out west where they have a lot higher constituency rates per MP. So I would argue I would push for not necessarily proportional representation, but adding and taking away seats where they're needed. East Coast is abundantly overrepresented in their fairly small surface areas. You can't redistribute from the territories because of how large they are, of course. But for a start, it would certainly be adding in and removing some seats so that at least the playing field's a little bit more average. Hey, not a problem.
Conservatives will not be taking our votes for granted after this election. I'll tell you that right now. All right, one here. Hello, what's your name? Where are you from?
I'm Brianne. I'm from Grunthal. I want to ask a question from people like me. I'm a mom, busy with kids, busy at home. I don't follow government or politics or government very closely enough to understand why I should put my vote in any one party's. Like, I know why I should vote, but what I'm asking is, can you tell me in the most simplest terms why I would want to give the PPC my vote? Because what are you guys all doing? What is your plan for us in Ottawa, and how are you going to step forward to represent this riding?
Thank you for the question. So as previously stated, we are a small government conservative movement. We want to largely, it's going to sound odd, but do nothing for you. We actually want to remove ourselves from the situation as much as possible. We'd like to get the federal government out of your gun cabinet. We'd like to get them out of your gas station, first and foremost. We'd especially like to get them to back off from these unconstitutional measures with regard to your employment, your places of worship, and your businesses.
Yes.
The only party not for segregation.
That's right.
Is that an insane statement or what? It's a vote for the left or a vote for the People's Party. Those are your options. All right, we'll wrap it there, folks. Noel. Oh, we got one more from Garth. A question or an opinion you're going to share?
There will be a question. Okay, I've got a son who's in the military, and it drives me absolutely up the wall, knowing that the majority of the time that they're sitting there playing video games. It's an absolute waste of tax dollars in that particular regard, particularly considering that they would like to get out to the range and actually learn and practice what they're actually supposed to be doing for when they get into a combat situation. One of the biggest problems that they're always told is that their equipment is not up to par. They don't have the finances for doing live round training. They're literally shooting blanks off a laser sight when they go out to the range. Like just absolutely moronic things along those lines. What do you plan on doing? And then you got, of course, Mr. Sox in Ottawa, who eliminates a lot of the contracts we had for new equipment and then brings in subpar stuff. What are the plans that you guys have to build up our military to actually have the capability of protecting us and taking us back into a role where we're not just a laughing stock of the world as far as our military goes?
Good question, thank you. This may seem like a non-answer. To a large degree, it will revolve around us getting our fiscal picture back on the same page to such a point as we can make those expenditures. One that, you mentioned derelict equipment. One piece of equipment I've heard a lot of our regular forces members indicate to me that's a little bit on the outs. I don't know if you guys know, our sidearm hasn't been replaced since World War II. That should be very depressing for all of us. The fact that we have a piece of equipment that's been there for near 80 years. Sorry if it's not as directive an answer, but the main thing is we need the finances to be actually able to make those investitures. The gentleman asked if we could reallocate CBC's funding. That is already in the plans.
Yeah.
We're planning on defunding the CBC.
Hey, man.
But as I stated, with the very dire fiscal situation that we're looking down at this point, I think last time I checked, it was something like $1.2 trillion was the federal debt. We're certainly going to need to be addressing this immediately and then looking at further expenditures afterwards.
Question here.
Okay.
Where does the People's Party stand on the universal child tax? Is the question. The credit? Yeah.
So we don't have any official position. With myself, I'm relatively supportive of it. We have no official position, I suppose, would be the easiest way to say that.
Going once. Isaac, got one more? Question? Yeah. Yeah. For sure. Yeah, we'll wrap it with that. So just Isaac's comment here, and I think everybody knows this, but it's good to reiterate it. Your neighbors, your friends, your family in this riding, lots of them are typical PC conservative voters that feel that their vote is going to waste if they vote for the People's Party. So when you're talking to them, it's the same thing Noel iterated before. There is no such thing as a vote split in the Provencher riding. It doesn't exist. It's a fallacy. The PCs are taking our votes for granted. There is a vote for the party that has stated openly that they are for the vaccine passport, that they are not going to roll back the gun ban, the PC party. And lots of people are saying, well, let's vote for them to keep out the party that also believes those things. what kind of logic is that? Right? So just when you're talking to your friends, your family, your neighbors, and you're telling them, hey, come election day, what are you going to do? Reiterate that. There is a vote for the left, and the PCs are on the left now, or there is a vote for the People's Party. And the vote for the People's Party is a vote for freedom. We got last one here. What's your name? Where are you from?
Sundown.
Matthew from Sundown.
Hi. So, if you do get it, is there anything you can actually do about the vaccine passports?
So for vaccine passports issued by the federal government, this will largely depend on the composition of the House when post-election. So providing we pick up in between 5 to 10 seats, I'm of the opinion will likely make up the balance of power for a conservative minority. As we know with these cases, it will give us a lot of leverage to ask the Conservatives for our constituents and to argue on those positions. So from that, I do believe on the federal level that'll be quite easy to attain very quickly. On the provincial level, with the provincial passports that have been discussed previously, it's another position where, say, if we're a minority, or say in some odd scenario we pull a 2016, we could definitely make a lot of changes with regards to the relationship between the federal and provincial governments to, let's say, push them along and to making the right decision.
One more. Yeah, we can do one more.
One big question here. So we get into power. How can we look at maybe finding an elected position for our Manitoba chief doctor rather than appointed?
In reference to the medical dictatorship that we are living under currently.
I'd be fully supportive of an elected position. I kind of question how it might work for chief medical officer, because I do believe there is some requirements for that individual to be a physician. In addition, I would also address that it is normally a provincial jurisdiction. So with myself, we would like to fire Dr. Teresa Tam.
Yes.
Does this adequately answer the question?
Thank you, everybody. There's we got more hot dogs here going on the grill, chips, drinks. Feel free to hang out, enjoy, hug some people, shake some hands. Appreciate you guys. And remember, this riding is going purple.
Yeah!